We finally reached Hawaii after 4 days at sea. Our first port of call is Kona on the Big Island of Hawaii. But since there isn't a dock big enough for our ship, we're having to tender to shore. Now, if you've never taken a tender before from a cruise ship to the port, here's what happens. The morning of arrival, they will start handing out tender tickets, or on our cruise, they were listed as water shuttle tickets. You simply can't go downstairs and board one. You must have a tender ticket. They will be labeled with a group number or some other way to differentiate between groups. On Royal Princess, all of our tender groups were named after some kind of sea creature. We received sea anemone. And as a side note, be advised to listen carefully because the person who will be calling out tender ticket groups might not have the same accent that you do, as well as not from where you're from, so their pronunciation might be different from what you're expecting. So we were sea anemone, but the Italian cruise member called our group as sea anemone. Another reason why they want you to wait until you're ready to go is to make sure that when your group is called, you are ready to leave the ship. If you get tickets before you're ready to leave and go off and have breakfast, and they call your group, you can't just finish having breakfast, go back to your cabin to get your stuff, and then go down to board a tender. Your group tender would have left an hour before, and you will have to go back upstairs to get another group tender ticket. So always wait to get your tender ticket until you're ready to go. Once you have your tender ticket, get a seat on the same deck that they are calling the groups from. Usually, it will be in the centrum area of the ship on the bottom floor. Once your group is called, you will follow the crew member who will lead your group down the stairs to where the tenders are boarding. Make sure you have your princess medallion before you leave your cabin. You'll need it in order to get off the ship and to board the tender. Not to mention, you will need it in order to get back onto the ship. If you're going on a ship-sponsored tour, you will meet your tour group somewhere on board the ship, usually the theater. You won't need to get separate tender tickets for your tour group since your tour group will be boarding the tender together. Also, some ships don't allow people who are in wheelchairs to board tenders. Every cruise line is different. If you need your wheelchair, you will need to be able to get out of the wheelchair in order to board the tender and also to disembark from the tender. They will then stow your wheelchair near the exit door. Another reminder is that if you get motion sick, you will need to be prepared for that. Tenders are usually the ship's lifeboats and there are no stabilizers on them. So you will be in the ocean when you board the tender, and depending on the conditions, it can get pretty rocky out there between the ship and shore. So take your Dramamine or your Bonine before leaving, or wear sea bands or get the patch for seasickness before you disembark the ship. Once on board the tender, you'll pick a place to sit. There generally aren't chairs on board the tenders. Usually they'll be the chairs that are stuck together, or that'll be just a flat bench. They will also try to put as many people on the tender as is allowed to have before leaving the ship. Depending on the location you are visiting and the weather conditions, you might want to have a sweater handy if the weather is chilly. The tender doors are usually open, so it can get cold inside depending upon where you are for your cruise. The ride on the tender usually is about 10 minutes in length from ship to shore. It's pretty loud too. I was lucky for this ride to be next to the door, so I was able to see outside as we approached Kona. The area here is the downtown area where you can find a lot of shops and restaurants. Make note of the church there. We will be heading for an alleyway to the right of it later on. As your tender arrives at the port, they will tie it up to the pier and allow people to disembark. Make note of where it is so you know where to go to get back on the ship. You should also make note of when the last tender to the ship is. If you miss it, then you will have to fly to your next port of call on your own dime. The ship won't wait for you. Unless you are on a ship-sponsored tour that has been delayed, remember that ship will not wait for you. There should be a notice next to the tender drop-off that states when the last tender will depart. Mom and I didn't have much planned for Kona today. Our only plan was to go to a quilt shop located a few streets above the church we saw earlier. There's an alley to the right side of the church that took us up to Quilt Passions. It was about a 15-minute walk. On our Alaska road trip in 2021, we stopped at different quilt stores to buy fabric and patterns and had fun with that. Mom then took everything home and made us quilts. We were going to do the same thing here in Hawaii, but in my research, we found that Quilt Passions on Kona was the closest quilt shop to the ship during our 3 ports. It was a cute little place with loads of fabrics and patterns. I bought this kit that makes the quilt look like it has a bunch of postage stamps on it. And here's a photo of the finished quilt my mom made for me. I will treasure it always. After our shopping at Quilt Passions, we made our way back to Aloha Drive to head back to the tender pickup. We stopped off across the street at Big Kahuna Beach Grill for lunch and had a great spot overlooking the tenders and Royal Princess in the distance. After lunch, Mom decided to head back to the ship, while I went across the street to the courtyard by Marriott Hotel. Rowena had recommended Ululani's Hawaiian shave ice, located at the hotel, as the best in Hawaii. It was indeed delicious. On the way to Ululani's inside the hotel, I passed these informative dioramas showing different aspects of Hawaiian culture and life. I really enjoyed them. Then it was time to board my tender back to the ship. I hope you enjoyed learning about tendering from your ship to port. As we head off into the sunset, our next port of call is Honolulu on Oahu, where we will be spending the next 2 days. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you're informed of when the next video drops. Until the next video, mahalo from Hawaii.